comes from that experience. The focus, I will share a little bit about the tooling, but the focus for today is not all around the tooling. It's about creating the space to enable all of the amazing things that typically happen in in-person PI plannings to also happen in this new virtual setting. So, and maybe we can start this with the chat if anyone wants to, or anyone wants to verbalize it. Has anyone been in a virtual PI planning yet? I'm seeing at least one yes come through. So what I would like you to do is in the chat, what I'd like you to add is if you were going to use one word to describe that experience, not just the regular PI planning, but the virtual PI planning. If you were going to use one word to describe that experience, what word would you use? Intense, I agree with you there. Messy, kind of brings us back to the first PI planning ever in a lot of enterprises. Disorganized, real time. Yeah, my word that I always think about with the first PI planning that we had was curiosity. And it's not just because that's my favorite word and I'm curious about everything, but I was really, really curious going into that of how we were going to pull this off. When you think of the power of PI planning, and we'll go through, a little bit about that to start, there's a lot that happens. So as you start to picture those conversations that you used to have in the hallway, maybe not even in the formal part, the formal main room, that's really where the magic of PI planning happens. So the first, as I mentioned, maybe I didn't, I'm Audrey Boydston. I work for Scaled Agile as an SPCT, and I work a lot with large enterprises as well as do a lot of public training classes. I came to Scaled Agile a year ago, January, so about coming up on almost a year and a half. Before that, I had established my own company and was doing some work with Western Digital. And before that, my whole career has been, before now, has been within large enterprises, the last 8 of which were at Capital One. So I spent a lot of time there with a lot of different Agile release trains. I actually can't even count how many PI plannings that I've been to. So when you think about PI planning, we think there's no magic in it at all in SAFe except for PI planning. This is where everything comes together. And so whenever I think of PI planning, we used to get so excited about it. I was spoiled, I will say, because for 8 years, we had everybody co-located. Everybody was in the same room. We were all together. Whatever decisions needed to be made, we just needed to walk over and talk to somebody. We even went so far one year to rent an entire conference hall. And we had all of these different rooms for all of the arts within a value stream. So even if you couldn't find what you needed in one room, there was just a walk across the hall or down the hall to find the other people. So PI planning really allows for communicating all of the business objectives, eliminating all of these siloed decision-making, because everybody's there that you need to make those decisions. You can collaborate around all of those decisions that you make. And to me, my favorite part of being part of an Agile release train is the community that you feel and the community that you're a part of within that art. And when you see it all come together in PI planning, that's the cool part for me. So when you think of the primary benefits of PI planning, you're gonna say, all right, these just seem like the stock ones, like yes, check mark that we're aligned, the business is aligned with technology, we know what the vision is, we know how what we're going to build actually helps us deliver on our business strategies. We talk about dependencies, how do we foster a collaborative space for people. I mentioned the faster decision-making. The biggest part here that I want to focus on here and following from here is the social network. Building the social network is really what the art depends on to move forward. So when you think of that now in terms of, hey, we're all over the world, we're all in our kitchens, our dining rooms, our basements perhaps, a guest room. We still want to make sure that however we set up this PI planning event, people can still take part and grow those social networks that they have been working through. So I want you to think about a lean agile mindset. To me, this just wouldn't be a safe presentation if I didn't have the House of Lean somewhere in here. So I want you to think about some of the basic tenets that we have in the House of Lean. So when you think about respect for people and culture, one of the pillars of the House of Lean, first and foremost, respecting people and culture. And this is a really gentle reminder to empathize for those people who might be potentially working really late into the night or starting very early. Sometimes we might lose sight of that. I was in a PI planning once that was distributed from the perspective of we had 2 arts in one state on the East Coast, a state on the West Coast. We had a place in Japan. We had a place in Kuala Lumpur. We had 2 places in Poland. We were all over the board. This was our #1 focus throughout that whole period, which we actually took 3 days to accommodate, was always you never want to put people in the spot, whether it's in person or virtual, where they have to commit and make decisions in the middle of the night. Relentless Improvement is my favorite. There's a video coming out soon from Scaled Agile where I talk about some experiences here. But this isn't just, our intent is not just to improve the experience of remote planning over time, but also to identify ways that we can improve throughout the planning itself. So we don't just wait until it's all over or like, okay, great, I didn't have the right people, or I didn't know the best way to approach another team when I needed them. So going into these virtual PI planning sessions, top of mind should always be, how do we make this better? Like now, not after it's over. How can we make those improvements now? And when you think about the Agile Manifesto, it's all about individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So when you think about now that we have this virtual PI planning where we're all distributed, this means also making the integration of tooling as seamless and pain-free as possible. That's one of the focuses that we had, that I will show you some of the outputs from that. So I remember when I taught my first virtual training class, and I found this picture, and I thought, this is how I felt. Not everybody was on video. I had slides in front of me, and I remember thinking, I need to make this as close as I can to the in-person classes that we had. So it got me thinking, people are in those seats, even if you can't see them. So how are you going to make sure that the experience and the intended outcomes of that event are still going to be there, even if we're in this other setting? So the biggest thing here, share the facilitation. I love teaching the RTE class. That is one of my favorite classes to teach. It is based on Sharon Bowman's training from the back of the room. And as facilitators, that is like very close to my heart. This is one of my favorite books. I train these classes as well with her. And the biggest thing that I ever tell anyone in my RTE classes, my future RTEs, my current RTEs, is share the facilitation. And it's really important when you have this virtual space that you do that as well. So that means as the RTE, you're mentoring and you're growing the Scrum Master community that you have for your art. You're spending time mentoring them to get them ready. I always tell RTEs, some people are not as happy when I tell them this. Some are like, wow, that's kind of a relief. Is if I was coming from the outside and I came to your PI planning and I couldn't identify within the first moment who the RTE was. Maybe the Scrum Master was running part of the meeting. Maybe they were helping, with the Scrum of Scrums or something. Then that to me is a positive experience that shows that the RTE has created a community with those Scrum Masters so strong that they could actually take that over themselves. But that's not even the intent here. The intent here is to really share this facilitation. You're growing other people. And most importantly, you're not setting yourself up as the RTE as a bottleneck. Now, this is especially crucial in a virtual setting. Imagine you have 8 teams, 10 teams on an ART, and they're all in their different virtual breakout rooms. It's different than in person where you can just see them all collectively right in front of you, and you can see when somebody needs you, and you can walk over and you can have a conversation. But instead, if they're all in these separate breakout rooms, you find yourself kind of going back and forth. What do you need? How do I help? What do you need? When you've spent time helping and you share that facilitation, it's going to make sure that you don't have one person that could be bottlenecking your process and bottlenecking and preventing some of those outcomes. This is about creating the space. This is about communicating with everybody in your ART ahead of time so they know what to expect. You want to set up spaces for them where they can collaborate, where they can spend time just with their team, where they know how to get back to the main room. They know when they need to come back to the main room. They know how to get in touch with other teams. So this is all about enabling the collaborations. Whatever tool you use, how can people move back and forth and have the conversations that they need to have? This is about fostering curiosity. One of the favorite parts of our first virtual PI planning was when we would have somebody from another team just come in to check in. They're like, hey, just wanted to see how you're all doing. Anything we can do to help? Ask questions. Maybe even if you're not sure if you need another team, ask the questions about it. Be curious. Maybe go into their room, like the example I just gave you. What are some of those things that you can learn about that team? Although one thing that I do, being overly curious, is I was going to all the other teams, like, what are you working on? And a lot of us, there's dependencies. Think of our courseware alone. You have virtually every team in our company that is involved when we have new releases. So when you think of, we are now, working on some remote trainer badges and other things. I'm working with our learning and certification group all the time. And then I'm working with our framework team. And then I'm working with, our INT, which is our technology group. I am working with the other advisors, the other SBCTs, because we're guides for candidates in the program. And then I support the Americas, which is, the enterprises and the partners. So what happens sometimes is then you go to those other groups and they're like, wow, we would love to have another perspective, another viewpoint on this. Would you like to, do you have some time that maybe we can collaborate around this? Make sure that that can still happen. And there's avenues for that to happen even in this virtual setting. Visiting the teams, like I said, and then extending grace. This is a new environment. And when you think of any new change that you insert into anything, there's some uncomfortable space. People aren't sure what to expect. So you want to help provide the environment where they feel comfortable, they feel safe in that environment. And if people are having a hard time with it, extend some grace. Find out how that you can help with them moving forward. So when you think of virtual working agreements, I pulled this from a deck that was given by somebody else at Scaled Agile a few weeks ago. And I was looking at this list. And then I was thinking, Cameras on, that's what you want. But then the part of me that's always concerned with psychological safety is saying some people aren't comfortable. They get, fatigued being on camera all day. So when we have, and this is just a list of starting point, you might scratch half of them and just use this just to prime your thinking into others. But for all of these, I want you to think about what the potential impact could be on not only you, but also on your art. One conversation at a time. I will tell you that is one of the hardest parts when you are training in this new, this, I'll call it temporary virtual setting, is that sometimes there's a lag. So sometimes if there's a pause, like allow a pause before then you add another thought in. Maybe there's some tools where there's multiple questions about something. Maybe it's, after the first executive briefings, if there's lots of questions, find a way that maybe they can, raise their hand or something so you don't have, all these people trying to talk at once. Respecting your airtime. Introduce yourself when you join a team channel. Like I said, it was like, hey, I'm here. That doesn't mean you do it as soon as you join. You wait until there's a pause, especially if there's a really intense conversation going around and people are really focused on something. You don't want to just come in the room and be like, hey, I'm here. It's Audrey, just checking in. People know you're there. People have, can see that as soon as somebody comes into their room. We found that using chat for questions during large session works very well. In fact, we actually do that whenever we have our system demos. So the people can, congratulate, ask some questions about it, get more information about it. We found that that works even in other settings. It's not necessarily PI planning. This was a big one for me. Don't work alone without your teams. So when you think of a lot of these things, they relate whether it's in person or it's not. But the biggest part here is we know that this is just a different space. This is an uncomfortable space for people. But you want to look out for those people that are maybe going off on their own, like, well, I think I need to talk to somebody, and then they're gone for a while. Find out what's going on and see how you can help them. And then my favorite one is assuming positive intent. This goes along with extending grace that we talked about a few moments ago. Assume positive intent on these conversations. Sometimes people feel lost. Extend grace to them and assume positive intent no matter, what's going on. So creating communication pathways. So we had a lot of different, and I'm going to move this because you probably can't see the whole screen with that. Okay. So creating communication pathways. This means, do you have Slack, or do you have another way that people can communicate with each other? So what we did is we had a Slack channel for the facilitators to stay connected. We had one where each team had their own Slack channel. All teams could post questions or request times to meet with these teams. So that was pretty cool. We had a channel for continuous feedback. How is it working? Is our time box too long? Do we need to gather together sooner? One thing we did feel that we were missing was ways to have discussions around specific features. So to correct this, actually during the event, we created some new channels that were specific to each one of the features. So if there were any questions, we could see what that was. So one thing that was clear throughout, was that these communication channels and the previously mentioned, collaboration tools greatly increased the cognitive load on each attendee. And we saw that in the feedback that came out in the retrospectives. Sometimes it's, wait, I have this these Zoom groups that I can get to the groups this way. I have Slack, I have this tool, I have that tool. Sometimes it's just a little bit too much. So keeping it simple is really the #1 message here on that. As we continue to refine our approach, I'm suspecting we're going to look at reducing the number of channels. It did quickly become overload. So how do we make that simple? Simplicity was the #1 goal next time. if we're still doing this at this point in time. And then support. Who needs support for something? Maybe it's a technology support, could be anything related to that. Oopsie. So maintaining engagement during the event. One fun thing that we were able to do was find ways that people could engage with each other on fun topics. So we would actually start each day with some type of an icebreaker. And whenever I talk about icebreakers, this isn't something random, like, oh, let's just, I found this game in this book. There are 1,000,001 activity books out there with 1 to 3 minute icebreakers. I know because I probably own 90% of them. The point here is find something that will really resonate with your art. What's that one way that you can get them talking, get them feeling comfortable, even within this new setting? So find an icebreaker that's related to that. Get them talking about what they're feeling and how we can make this a really successful and enjoyable event for them. So one of the things that we did make sure that during any of the longer presentations that we had, like the plan reviews and such, that we had small breaks so that people can get up and walk around. I personally recommend at least every 50 minutes to an hour, you take at least a 5 to 10 minute break. Get people up, getting them walking around. I learned another new cool techniques since then that what we've done is, when you have these 5 or 10 minute breaks, have everybody put their video on, even if they're not there, put it on and then walk away so that we know they are taking a break from this. It's really essential that you do that. Just take a short walk, maybe go outside, get something to drink, but just completely walk away from the computer instead of moving from, okay, I have a break, I need to catch up on my email. But it's really helping focus in the long term for that specific event. Another thing to consider is how people might mark themselves as busy using communication tools to make sure that they don't get interrupted too much. I know I've seen the do not disturbs and such. One important additional working agreement that we created was during the event was, as much as possible, avoid contacting individuals directly. So in other words, posting in their team channel instead of where just one person. So instead of, I'm going to send a Slack message to this one person because I need them, if you actually do it within their team, then if they're not available, we're cross-functional teams, right? We're all committing together. We should, as a team, be able to get that person an answer, even if that one person is not available. So we also did during some of the breaks, we did these at lunches. We did this, as like after hours things. Remember, it's all about the social network and keeping it a social network for your art. So a couple of different things. We would have Meet the Kids. So we would have a specific Zoom room just for people to come bring their kids in. We wore hats. I know my son brought me like 8 or so. And so it was kind of cool to have all of the kids meet each other as well. There was another channel for Meet the Pets. So people who have pets, all brought them in there. There were charades. We found out that we have some pretty fantastic musical talent in our organization. We had some that would start our day off with this. Find those ways where, people are willing to get in front of everybody and share something about them. And it also helps to keep the energy up. We would do little quizzes like, okay, you listened to all of the briefings earlier today. How much do you remember? Is there anything that's not clear? Because then maybe that's going to help us in our sense of relentless improvement when we go into the next one. But engagement, this I could probably talk about for hours. Keeping people engaged really enables them to make those good decisions that they need. If people aren't engaged and they're kind of off to the side and they're multitasking and they're working on this, then this, and their focus keeps changing, It's really hard for me to be fully confident in decisions that are made when people are not all engaged. It's a subset of them. And when you think of an Agile release train, you are set up as a team of teams. That means you're working together collectively. It means the same business strategies that are presented, whatever the vision is for your art, you are all part of something bigger than just your team. So enabling those opportunities where people can stay engaged, not just with their teams, but also with the other teams, is really essential to make sure that you are going to get all of the benefits of PI planning. So everyone together presentations. You want to make sure that you have your presentations uploaded ahead of time. They're ready to go. Sometimes I've seen when you have groups that are all over the country, all over the world, and there's just a lot of time zone differences. I've seen sometimes these are recorded and then people have an opportunity to watch them before going into PI planning. This helps, especially if you're doing it over a 3-day period. I remember once before our completely virtual environment here, when we had all of those different countries that I spoke about, is we had sessions in the different business units the day before. So depending on your time zone, everybody had an opportunity to go through these sessions. What they were also doing though, so in this instance, is they were taking questions and they were capturing those so that the leaders did come up again at the very beginning of the PI planning to say, hey, here's some of the questions that you have. Here's some of our answers to them. And then they moved on from there. We wanted to make sure that everyone had a voice and everybody understood the intent and how they all fit into the big picture before we went into our planning. So as our first start, everybody's together. They're all in the same Zoom. Some of the things that we tried, not only were uploading the presentations, we recorded the presentations, we posted the recordings so that everybody had them. And then each presenter had their presentations ready to go and understood their position in the running order so they could seamlessly get this all taken care of ahead of time. Then we also had a visible timer to manage the time boxes, and that is huge. Without a timer, it's really hard for people to gauge, like, how much time do I have left? Am I over? Am I under? Do I still have, some time in case I want to ask them if they have any questions, if it's live? So team planning and collaboration. So during the breakouts, we used the same approach with our collaboration tools. We were recreating existing patterns of behavior, and there was interactive team planning on the board that you could see real time. We also had each team breakout, there was a quick huddle, like a quick sync that we had for each team. That helped in a remote event, especially since sometimes you think about it, you get into your breakout group and then all of a sudden side conversations happen and then it's, oh wait, I need to talk to somebody on another team and somebody leaves. It was a really good opportunity to get everybody together to sync before they all, went into other breakout rooms to get some dependencies resolved. Scrum Masters were just completely essential for this. They were helping when we needed another team. They would bring somebody into ours and so forth. One key thing, make sure that your key stakeholders, including your business owners, are available for the teams. Especially if teams were assuming that they could commit to something and then all of a sudden they're like, oh wait, hold on, we forgot about, or we just remembered that we're also going to engage with this team. Or by the way, we were going to build this way, but we just came up with this really great idea. It might take longer, but in the long run, it might be the best idea. So you want to make sure that people can have access to your business owners, your product management team, your system architect, and all of those other roles that could help them. Continuous feedback and realignment. As I mentioned at the start, we were looking for feedback throughout the entire session. How can we do better at this? And I've done this at PI plannings for the last how many years? Even when we go back and we are all one day back together again in this big room planning, co-located, I want you to think about some of these techniques that we're talking about. And we might not have talked about them in person. And now all of a sudden we're talking about them in our virtual environment, but they're still just as essential in these in-person sessions. So I want you to think of continuous feedback. We would have boards all around the room. What we do in Zoom, we would have our own tool where we would go in the back and we would have a forum set up so people could just get in. There's Miro, I could just go on for 5 minutes on all the different tools out there. But what is the collaboration tool that you're going to use where people can go in and they can give real-time feedback? So it's not at the very end when you realize that, wow, if only I knew this halfway into day one, I totally could have fixed this for them. A lot of times too, it's just surveys, some real-time polls, like how are we feeling? How's the pace? Do we maybe need to shorten the day? How is everybody feeling? What could we do to make this better? It needs to be top of mind of every person helping facilitate that event. You might need to adjust or add some working agreements along the way. What are you learning that's working? What are you learning that you need to maybe change? You still want to be able to present your planning adjustments at the start of each day. And that's what we did. It needs to be visible so people understand, like, hey, this is the course we were taking. We brought some risks up. What are some of those things that we had to pull back or make adjustments to? And that just goes to even roaming the risks. Even back in person and especially in virtual. The same intent is making them visible throughout the session, not just till the very end. You want to make sure that whoever you need to talk to maybe resolve this, find out what those next steps are for this, that you're doing it actually throughout the event. Create an alignment across the facilitators at the start of each day. So you'd have the RTE, you had Scrum Masters, you had other people that volunteered, other coaches that said, hey, you know, what can we do to make this better? Do we need to divide and conquer a little bit? Do we need to have any other separate breakouts with very specific teams? So picture some of those previous in-person ones when all of a sudden it was, hey, in this part of our big room at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, this team and this team are all going to go in this corner and we're going to have a discussion around whatever that topic is. You're still going to have those in the virtual setting. How do you manage that is really the important question. Confidence vote. So I want you to think about the difference in the confidence vote in person and remote. The confidence vote in person, especially if you're there, or when we had multiple locations, but we had these large videos, everybody was in, you know, these different locations all around the world, but we could see, and we had facilitators in each location, we could see what all the confidence votes were. So I want you to think about a virtual setting. How do you make sure that everybody has a voice? How can you make sure that you can see everybody's voice? So sometimes there's online polls. There's tools like that. Sometimes I've seen people use chat. One thing to really think about that I have found works is having the Scrum Masters work with the teams before this confidence vote for the arts. Get a sense for what would keep them from being a 4 or a 5? And is there anything that we can do about it? If there's not, and it's a risk and the program works through it, great. But it's really important that you don't just wait till the end and then all of a sudden you have a 2. How do you work through that and find out, can we raise this confidence vote, or do we need to make an adjustment to our plan to accommodate it? I'll never forget one situation once, and leaders are still talking about this years later. When we took a confidence vote for an art, and we were all co-located at the time, that we were all in the same room. And we all took a vote, and everybody thought that they were okay, and everybody's giving 4s and 5s. And one of the software engineers stood up, and her voice was even like cracking because she was so nervous. And she's like, I am a 2, and here's why. She had had conversations with multiple other people in that art, and they still were like, yeah, but we have to be a 4, we have to be a 5. Just by the very fact that she had the courage, and she showed like, hey, it's because of this risk. It gave leaders the opportunity to rework something so that people were more confident. And it also gave the coaches a place where they could spend some more time on. Maybe it wasn't a safe space. What was the reason for that? How do we get better? So I want you to think about this in a virtual setting. You're not going to maybe see that too. So it's really important that you have all of those other roles, all of those other people, your super scrum masters, I call them. They're all trying to gauge the levels of confidence with your team during this event. So relentless improvement, which I said was my favorite pillar in the House of Lean, and knowledge sharing. So it's really important to get feedback on this experience, asking people to add their location, because this can help identify appropriate improvement actions. Maybe it's related to the tooling. Maybe it's related to the collaboration. Maybe it's related to the environment that was set up. Maybe the days were too long. So one of the things that I always recommend at the end, and I challenge all of my RTEs and my SPCs at the end of each class that I teach, is to come up with an entire chart of 5-minute or less retrospective activities. And there's a number of them out there. So I want you to think about during your typical PI plannings and how tired people get. Now they're starting to call it, there's a Zoom fatigue or whatever form of technology that you use. People get tired of being on video all day. So what can you do to make sure that you capture some information that's going to help you get better at this in the future, but also at the same time, make sure that people aren't there for an extra hour, like, great, we're finished. Rock on, let's move forward. By the way, I need you all to sag back for this long retrospective. That's not the intent of the retrospective at the end of the event. It's to find some opportunities that you can make it even better. One of the things, the techniques that, another Sharon Bowman technique that I'd love to share with you, which I think would work just fantastically in our virtual setting, is it's called glows and grows. So what you do is you say the glows are, these are the things where we knocked it out of the park. This was just amazing. I had all of access to all the people that I need. I had full engagement and interactions that I needed with my business owners. The timing was great, and you could go on and on. And here's the grows areas. Here's the areas where we could get better. So I want you to think about, well, you're not going to have these in the virtual setting, or ones that you can't do anything about, is I didn't like the food. So if you change that to a grows, then it's, hey, is there a way that you could possibly have more vegetarian options next time? Something like that. Can't help people in their own house if they don't like their lunch. But my point is it's really important to give people an opportunity to speak about what worked for them and what didn't. You might have those moments where you're like, I had no idea. We thought that we had this set up like we needed to. And these retrospectives are really going to help you with that. So I just wanted to briefly touch on and show you the 3-day planning agenda we had. We had the typical, you have your opening, your business context, the product vision, planning guidance, your team breakouts, scrum of strums, and then we had a retrospective. So that was our whole day. It was 5 to 6 hours. That was it. And what we're finding, the more that we're researching on how people learn and how people engage, it's really hard to just say, I have 8 hours or 9 hours on the calendar for you. Day 2, we also had to account for different time zones. We had our draft plan review on day 2, the management review and problem solving, any adjustments. Our second team breakouts for our EMEA and our APAC folks were on day 3, the business value assignment. Then we had our final plan review, roaming risks, the confidence vote, appreciations, and we had our retro and we closed it out. So this is just a sample agenda. Again, this you're going to see this on the video, and I think we'll have a PDF of this for you. Just something to gauge on timing of what we found that worked. This is just a sample too of our tool of wherever people are going to collaborate together. What's their entrance? Okay. So they go to a link. This is one. This is where I joined PI planning. So we had a link behind that. Here's where all the teams are. And for each one of these tables, if you hovered over it, you would actually get, okay, here's the Zoom link. So if you'd like to join them. Also, here's their collaboration space so you can see their boards and any other information. Oh, by the way, here's their Scrum Master and their product owner and all the other people that are going to be in there. We also had the presentations here. So if people wanted to take a second look at something. We had our program board, our PI objectives that we had for each team here. And when you wanted to join the Scrum of Scrums, you could just do it a click of a button here. So it wasn't just reserved for a specific subset. You didn't have a million calendar invites. You just had one, which landed people in this spot. And then I just wanted to point out, we have a ton of new articles on whether it's teaching, whether it's PI planning, other events and stuff. So there's a ton of stuff in the community site that you can take a look at. We do have a new one on distributed PI planning that we've just added. Okay, I'm going to hand it over. That is all I have for you today. And then we will have, I think, a little bit of time for some questions. So does anyone from ALEPH want to come and maybe, do you have any of the questions that you could take me to? I don't know if they were way up in chat or how you want to handle this.
Hey, Asana, you there?
Yes. So I have noted down the question that we had received so far.
Can you share your screen?
Yeah, you want to, here, let me, I think I have to unshare first.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can move this first. Here we go. Okay.
Okay, can you zoom in a bit? So can you just make it a little bigger?
I think we lost your screen. Okay. Oh, did the leaders play the presentation from the pre-recorded before they answered questions that were asked the day before? So they had it when they're pre-recorded and questions were asked, they compile all of those questions and then they answer it at the very start of the actual event. Was that it? Did that answer the question, or was there something, another part of that?
That answered my question.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Dave. So what's the best real-time tool to get feedback? Gosh, there's so many out there and we have so many partners. What I have found, there's a lot of retrospective tools out there that you use that are going to help you get feedback. We have our own tool that we are I don't know if you've heard of the Weave platform, but anyone who is a member of the SAFE community, I call it the best kept secret. If you go to your community site and you go to the way bottom of the page after it welcomes you and it tells you all of your certifications, if you go to the way bottom, it'll show you, it'll say collaboration tools.
Okay.
If you click on that, you get into Weave. I call it our best kept secret because we're still trying to build it out. I've been using it for my trainings. It's not fully built out yet on, you know, all the stuff to make this virtual environment successful, but we're working on it. But lots of opportunity for you guys to play around in it and use it. I have found that that really works. I've been using that for different things. A lot of times what we did in one recent class that I had with one of our partners is he would have these Zoom polls that came up. So a lot of times there's like this real-time polling and stuff that you can, you know, with specific questions that you might have that you could pose out to the group just to see what's going on. But yeah, there's lots and lots of tools out there. I think it's Metro Retro is another one that I saw somebody use recently. Miro, Mural, just all these different boards. Does anybody else that's on the call have a really good one they've used that they could share with us?
I've used Trello. I'm sorry. Go on, please.
Go ahead, Meena.
Okay. So my name is Meena, and I have used Trello for both the point estimation and the voting. But I found Poly.ai more fun. You could block the time for the polls, how much time they have for polls. They can write down their own points too, the questions and the feedback if they like something, dislike something, kind of for retro at the end.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so lots of tools out there depending on exactly what you're looking for. What I would do, these are great questions too on tooling that you could ask the community of, you know, whatever certifications you have too. You could just go to the community site if you're an SBC or SA, whatever, like, hey, what tools are you using? There's a lot of people that are swarming around this and giving their feedback. There's also a remote trainers channel too. Lots of different places for you to connect in the community site where you're going to get lots of information from people on these. So pointingpoker.com to capture story point estimates. There's lots of other tools. We had very specific ones in our Weave platform that we were using to put all of this information in. Pointing poker, yeah, that's a good one. I'll have to check that out. I have not tried that one yet. So is any tool that helps get discrete votes? I'm not sure. Has anyone used one where it is completely anonymous? I've not seen one yet that's completely anonymous.
Something that I used was setting up a Google form ahead of time and basically having those questions ready so that as soon as it's time to do the voting, people can pull up that link and do a discrete vote. When it comes to confidence voting, it's pretty simple to set up using Google Forms and dumping that into a spreadsheet.
Oh, that's a great idea. Thank you. So that's that one. Good tool to collect feedback. I think that goes back to the retrospectives and stuff. How do I measure success? So that begs the question, how do I measure the success of PI planning that's in person versus virtual, right? You could have some of the same things that are prohibiting you from meeting your plan, but it's really, a lot of it relates to the feedback too and how you're adjusting to that. So as people are collaborating, do they have access to all the people that they need? You can go so far as to say, oh, okay, well, my PI planning wasn't successful here because I didn't have any of my intent fully refined for the teams. So there's a lot of them here. There's a fine line of saying, is it really caused by us being in this virtual setting and why it wasn't as successful? Or was it really just something that was going on in my company that kept it from being that? The one way that I would look at is, do you have a setup like we had where people could go visit other teams? Because when you think of a typical art, not everybody is picking up features and saying, yep, we've got this. We don't need to collaborate with anybody else in our art. So as long as people have access to their business owners, their product management team, their architect, all of the other teams, that's what we found is really helpful in people coming to a plan that they can commit to and they feel comfortable with. Let me see. Oh, the sync or view team planning boards. That's a great idea. So in our tool, you could actually just click on it. And so when we were doing the readouts, we would click on it and then each team, we would have it on the screen and each team would go ahead and present their plan. And there's a ton of tools out there where it's really cool when you can see one visual and you see everyone's team's boards. I think if anyone's, I can't remember because I've only used them a few times on other projects. Miro, Mural, there's some of those where you can actually see all of the different things and the different places that people are collaborating on and one like big canvas. So there's a lot of those out there too. Let's see. It's one thing to go virtual after you have an established rhythm, but what about setting up the first PI planning? Has anyone experienced that with their very first PI planning going virtual? Maybe not. So a couple things that I would have you think about and consider. You have to make sure that whatever tool you're using allows them to collaborate. Having a really good facilitator for each room and have a few coaches. So not only, okay, great, you're a brand new Scrum Master, you're a brand new product owner on every single team, and you're in your first PI planning, there you go, there's your breakout rooms. You wanna really make sure that you have additional coaches, you know, additional facilitators, people that are gonna help these teams navigate through this whole area. A lot of the same things that you would experience in an in-person, you're gonna experience here as well. It's how do you keep people, even when they're apart, so they're in their different sessions, from still feeling like they're a part of something and they can move over to other groups and they can ask questions and they can get clarification and they can feel comfortable with the work that they're committing to, that they can actually complete it. The tool that we used, oh, with the link. Okay, that was our internal Weave tool that I was telling you about that you can get to on the community site. If you go to the bottom, I don't think I'm logged in. Let me just see if I can really quick. I can show you. Let's see. I'm going to share my screen in a second if I can get in from here. Okay, I'm going to just take back so I can share for one more second. It looks like I can't start sharing.
Yep. Yeah,
There we go. Okay, let me share one more time. Okay, so when you're in the community site and you just log in and this is your first site, it gives you your certifications. You can go to My Learning, save videos and such. If you go and scroll, let me move this. If you can scroll all the way to the very, very bottom, do you see this blue box called Collaboration Tools? This is where you go. As I said, best kept secret while we're working on it, but it's still available. Any feedback as you guys are looking at any of this and stuff, please feel free to reach out to me and happy to help because I'm giving our teams a really long list of what I'd like to see going forward. So you would just access now. You have to be obviously logged into your community site and then you can access it. okay, this is making me go through a bunch of hoops just because of the internal firewalls and stuff, but it would actually take you to there then at that point, and you could check it out. But that's where everything resides. Let me give back. All right, I'm going to stop sharing again. Can we, do you mind if you put the questions back up? I don't know if there were any more that, was there anything left? I think we might have gotten to them, the
I
tools.
think we have a couple, and then we can kind of move on to the next one.
Fine. Yep. Yeah. Oh, it's just more thought. Okay.
I believe that's it.
I think that was it. That
Yeah.
might be it. Okay,
All right. Okay.
awesome.
All
Well,
right.
Yep, thanks.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Audrey.
Nope, that was it. I just wanted to say thank you all for listening and for all the great questions that came out of this. If there's anything, my contact information should be in the email as well in case there's any other follow-up questions. Happy to help.
Thank you all. Appreciate it, Audrey. So, and also we have about 27 minutes or so. So like you said, as per our agenda, so I think next we're going to hand this over to Shantanu. Shantanu is from Vancouver, Canada. So we kind of wanted to share a success story of the remote PI planning, and Shantanu, he's an SPC and he's a consultant, and he has done some PI planning, remote PI planning with this specific client. Shantanu, over to you now.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for the opportunity. Hi, guys. Thank you so much, Audrey. That was phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing the insights. And it's pretty phenomenal. We have there are some of the questions that we had which got solved in your presentation today. So thank you so much for doing that.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. So let me go ahead and share my screen, guys, so I can share the slides that I used for the PI planning that we did at Pacific Blue Cross. Are you guys able to see my screen right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So we did it on the 29th and the 30th of April. This was the agenda that we went with. It is a 2-day PI planning that we did. So the red represents when everybody is supposed to be there on the call. And then the green represents when the business owners, the stakeholders, and anyone who is needed for the planning needs to stay back. So on day one, everyone is supposed to be there from morning 9 to 11. So we went through the business context where the business owners presented what was, so this is in sync with the agenda that we have for the actual physical PI planning. We just made sure that it was virtual. We had 135 participants on the Zoom call, pretty phenomenal. And including the business owners and everyone else, it went up to 178 participants that day. So quite a lot of facilitation and coordination had to go before we got onto the PI planning. So getting the Scrum Masters together, getting the POs together, making sure all the necessary breakout rooms were established, all of that happened before we got into the PI planning. But let me walk you through the agenda. So the business context, then the architectural vision and the development practices. The chief architect presented that. Then I came on and talked about how we are going to do this particular remote PI planning. Then there was a team breakout for 3 to 4 hours. The lunch was included in there so they can go do their own stuff and come back to the call in 30 minutes. After that, the management review where we brought everyone back, the program, the product owners, the product managers, the Scrum Masters, and any stakeholders that we needed. We all got back together at the end of the day from 2 to 3 for the management review and problem solving workshop. And from 3 to 4, we made sure that all the business owners were also in sync with what the teams had planned on day one. So there was alignment, the vertical alignment, which is pretty important with the business owners and the teams. Day 2, we came back again at 9 o'clock. The planning adjustments were told what is it that we changed on end of day 1, as Audrey mentioned. That's pretty important to do. Then we went ahead and did the team breakouts again, where the teams refined their plans. At 11 o'clock is when the business owners and stakeholders came back onto the call. So the teams could explain their plan and the business owners could assign the business values, and the team level risks were roamed and the vote of confidence were taken at the team level, just to make sure that there was nothing that is completely off track for the art. So after that was done, again, the lunch. The most important thing in the planning was the lunch that we did. After that, from 1 to 2, the business owners are the ones who presented what they had agreed that the teams will be working on in the next the PI planning period. After that, we made sure we have the portfolio board set up. All the Scrum Masters, the product owners, the product managers, all of them came back together to make sure the program board was set up. From 3 to 3:30, we had a retro and any final instructions, how to move on further with that. So that was the 2-day agenda. Here were some of the working agreements that we made sure were in place. So be present and participate fully, take breaks as necessary. We do understand that that fatigue that is caused by being in front of the laptop and the camera all day. So we made sure of that. If you need to leave anytime during the meeting, please do so quietly. You don't need to announce that, hey, I'm leaving. You can leave, and then you can always come back. Stay on mute unless you are the speaker. While you're on the meeting, keep your camera on. That is pretty important. And that was one of the things that we made sure happened, because when you're on camera, you tend to focus. When you're off camera, you tend to do other things as well. So it's important when we are planning for what we are going to do for the period of the PI to be completely focused on that activity. And it's no different than being present physically if you're in front of the camera. So that's something that we made sure happened. Use the raise hand feature in the Zoom if you had a question. If you click on the participants tab, and if you go on this way, you will have a raise hand feature. So that's one way of making sure that you are seen. And because if there are 178 people, there are multiple screens of Zoom. So it may not be possible to see if you're just raising your own hand physically. So the raise hand feature works pretty great for that. Use chat with everyone or with a specific individual if required, which is down here in Zoom again. So the chat feature, and if you go down here, you'll see who you can talk with and have fun. That's the most important thing. So these were some of the working agreements that we made sure we agreed upon before we got into it. This is where I presented what we were going to talk about. So the planning process, we came in, this is the same one that we use for the physical PI planning. We are bringing in what are the inputs, then we have the PI planning process and what are the outputs that are required. The two main outputs are your team PI objectives, which sync up to the program PI objectives as well as the program board. So this is the tool that we use for PI planning. It's called the piplanning.io tool. If you do not have a lot of time to set up your first virtual PI planning, this is the tool I can recommend you to go to. It's very simple to integrate and to start using right away. So log into the PI planning tool using the below credentials. So all the Scrum Masters and the product owners are given the credentials to their own team boards. So they can go there, they can log into the tool, and the password they can always request from the Scrum Masters who had the password. This is how the team board looks like. So it has the iterations in here. So 1, 2, 3. So this particular time, because it was the first time we are doing virtual PI planning, we planned for 5 weeks instead of for the whole 10-week duration that we usually do. So there was iteration 1, 2, 3. Then there is a PI objectives down here. There's a risks column down here, and the backlog is over here. So you can input all of your stickies in this particular rectangle, and then you can plan as we go about it. There's also capacity. That's the first thing that we do. And then the load as we calculate the story points for all of these stickies as we go about it. So the distinction of what colors are to be used for what were also made. For the team stickies, the features can be created on the team board and can be mirrored to the program board. There's a cool feature that is present in that tool, the piplanning.io, that when you create a sticky on your team board, if you want, there's a way for it to be mirrored onto the program board, so you don't have to duplicate your efforts. User stories stay on the team board, and other stories stay on the team board as well. Dependency. So picking the team team dependency on. So if you have a dependency on a particular team, what you can do is you can select that team, put your reds or pink sticky on that team board, which gets mirrored onto your team board as well as on the own program board. So there's a way to do that, which works pretty phenomenally well, because if you change something on the dependent sticky, it also changes on your board sticky. So the collaboration is real time. You can actually see what the other team is thinking and if they're able to accept that dependency or not in real time. That's a pretty phenomenal feature of this particular tool. Milestones and events can be created on the team board if you need it, and that can be mirrored onto the program board as well. This is how the program board looks like. So these are all the teams that we had, and these are the iterations that were there. So you can actually have these in the colors that you represent to have those stickies down there, the milestones, the features, the dependencies, and then you can actually tie it exactly like we do on the physical board. So this is like an actual real-time representation of how your physical board would look like on a virtual setting. This is how our board looked like. So this is the board that is in the demo of the planning tool on their website. This is how our board looks like. So it's quite messy, but it still works. So we can actually hover on any one of these stickies and it pops up. So we can read what is actually happening on that particular feature or that particular dependency or that particular milestone. Some documentation for you to help out to understand these tools better. So these are also available on their website. The goal is to align with the Smart PI objectives. So this is something that if you go back and look at your team boards, there is a column for you to input your PI objectives. And then the business owners can assign that the planned value, and at the end of the PI, the actual values as well. These were the iterations that we had planned. So the time frame of what needs to happen. So me being the RTE, I had to make sure that the teams are aware of what is the duration of each one of them. So if you observe that the IP iteration was from 20th May to 3rd of June, which is a 1 week iteration instead of a regular 2-week iteration. As this was our first time doing the virtual planning, we made sure we have shrink the whole 10 weeks to a 5-week duration. Team breakout rooms. So something that needs to be addressed is teams will plan their capacity and load, address dependencies and risks, and write their team PI objectives all within the PI planning tool. So we have that one central tool where we can all go and see what is actually happening there. The PMs and the SMs will meet at the Scrum of Scrums. So we did have assigned times when we could pull the Scrum Masters into a separate breakout room on Zoom where they can all go and we can have a Scrum of Scrum, exactly like we had in a physical setting. We had those times set when we will have those SOS and ask the specific questions, how we are progressing towards the planning. Using Zoom, so you will enter the main room. So that's where all of so we had made sure that there is a waiting room and we could pull people into that as we go about it. So let the host know which team breakout you want to go to. So this is for the business owners. When they enter the Zoom meeting on day 2 for their business value allocation, this is what they need to do. When they are into the main room, they can tell the host, which is me, the RTE, who is present there, or there is a assigned host, the Zoom host as we called it, because it may be difficult for the RTE to handle these the logistics part of Zoom when he's also facilitating the event. So it's a good idea to have a backup Zoom host who can be available to guide people to the right breakout rooms. So we had set out all of our breakout rooms in advance of the event. We had some extra breakout rooms there as well. So people could go and chat in those breakout rooms, come back to their main rooms, and then proceed with the planning. We also had a separate room for the SOS where all the Scrum Masters could go to for the SOS. So that's the way in which we use the feature of the breakout rooms in Zoom. So when the business owners enter the main room, they can let the host know which breakout room they need to enter, and the host can then direct them to that. If they have multiple teams that they need to go and assign business value to, all they need to do is leave the breakout room, click on that button, it brings them back to the main room so that the host can then assign them to the next breakout room. For the team members, so for them, as soon as the first 2 hours of talks were done, when we were presented the business context, the product vision and the architecture vision, and I had explained how to go about the planning, they all got a prompt on their screen which showed them that they have been assigned to a breakout room, and they can click on it so that they can go to their particular breakout room after that. So this was all done beforehand. The prerequisite for that is for everyone to have a Zoom account. Okay, that is a prerequisite if we need to have that set up in advance. There's always a way for the Zoom host to assign anyone who enters the main room to a particular breakout room, but it'll be awesome if everyone has a Zoom account, so we can do this in advance. So as soon as the host clicks enter breakout room, they can all be diverted towards their own breakout rooms. So the Scrum Masters are the co-hosts in the breakout rooms. They have the ability to enter and exit because we had made them as the co-hosts on Zoom. So if you are a co-host on Zoom, you have the ability to enter and exit any breakout room when you need to. So the Scrum Masters do need to go and talk to other team Scrum Masters, other teams to enter their breakout rooms to get an idea of if that dependency that they have on the other room is being accepted or not. So this is a great way for them to enter and exit breakout rooms as we go about. Asking for help, they can always raise their hand and they can always come back to the main room to ask for help, or if they ask for help, if they click on this button, the RTE or the host, the Zoom host, gets the indication that the help is needed, so he can go and enter that particular. In the PR planning.io tool, these were the teams that we had set up. Similar was also set up in Zoom. So we had all of these breakout rooms set up in Zoom in advance and also on the PR planning.io app. Day one, next steps. So business owners and stakeholders, the business owners, this is when we are done with me explaining how to go about it at 11 o'clock on day one. So the business owners can now leave Zoom meeting. The program managers will get in touch with you at the end of the day, blah, blah. So these are the instructions for how to go about it. And the team members can now enter the breakout rooms. This is when we actually went on to the team breakouts. So pre-planning, what is needed? So the agenda published and the calendar invite set to all attendees, business owners, and stakeholders for the time their attendance is required. Not everyone is needed for the entire duration of the PR planning. So it should be determined in advance when we need the business owners and the stakeholders to be present and send out the calendar invite for them to attend that particular session when they are needed. The agenda should be published way in advance so everyone is aware of what is going to happen during these 2 days. The Scrum Masters and product owners coached on the use of prplanning.io tool and the Zoom tools. So there is no, so it's a smooth process when we actually are in the PR planning. So we did have a dress rehearsal where for using the tools done the day before the PR planning event. We pulled together all the Scrum Masters, the POs, the PMs, all the people who will need to be aware of these tools. We pulled them all together and did a test run or a dry run of the PR planning that day. So enable everyone attending the PR planning event to have a Zoom account. This was done way in advance, at least a week in advance. We knew whoever was going to attend the PR planning, they all had a Zoom account with the organization, so we could enter that prior to the event, so we could have them in the breakout room. So the attendees can be assigned to the breakout rooms in advance. Creating breakout rooms in Zoom. So, and more than what is actually needed. So as you saw that we had created all of those breakout rooms. So when everyone is in the main room, we could assign them to individual breakout rooms and they can all go to that room as soon as we click the button of enter breakout rooms. So assigning Scrum Masters as co-hosts on Zoom, very important because that way they can jump around between breakout rooms. Enabling them to enter and exit any breakout rooms to address dependencies with other teams. Having to assign a Zoom host who is not the RTE. Very important because if the RTE is helping or facilitating the event, you don't want that person to be also playing around in the back end with Zoom and with the PR planning tool. So if there is someone else who is taking charge of that, the RTE can now focus on actually the facilitation of the people and the teams and solving their problems as it comes out. Right. So also the RTE and the host, the Zoom host should be in the main room, not in any breakout rooms. And if called, they can always go to their breakout rooms, and the RTE can then jump around between breakout rooms to check if there is any help that's needed there. Setting up PIPlanning.io with the correct settings and teams. So do you really want the dependencies to be duplicated on the program board or not? Do you really want that to be, do you want the features to be on your team board and on the program board, or just on the program board? Those decisions need to be made in advance so that the setup is already done for the PI planning tool. When we enter the day 2, again, we present the agenda. We go back to making sure all the planning adjustments are discussed. So what is the expectation when we are done with the team breakouts? The expectation is to accept the accepted dependencies represented on your team board, the dependent team board, and the program board. The features, milestones, accepted dependencies, and external dependencies represented on the program board, and linking with red strings. PI objectives listed and scored on your team board, ready to be presented to the ART at 1 p.m. Risks written on the risk board, roamed, and the vote of confidence taken. Program level risk written and represented on the program board. Business owners ready to present. Okay, so again, this is what was expected, how it's going to look like. This is what the team board looks like. If you see, this is where you will be able to see the PI objectives, and then the business owners can rate these over here. This is what it means by roam. So we are expecting the teams to roam their risks at the team level, and if it is not resolved, bring it up to the program level. The vote of confidence. So the way we did that is through a poll on Zoom. Like Audrey mentioned, there is a way to do this, and there can be multiple polls that you can have. So we use this one to have a real-time representation of what is the confidence level of the team. So you know, the fist of 5, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's the same assignment over here, and we published the results as soon as everyone was done voting over here. The retro for the event, we did a retro in the physical, in the virtual world as well, and then we also shot out a survey. So whoever was not able to voice out their opinion on there, they could actually take the survey and give us a feedback on how it goes. Moving forward, capture your plans. Each team is responsible for entering the plans. Azure DevOps is what we used. So to entering their plans in DevOps by end of Friday, we had the planning on Wednesday and Thursday. So end of the next day is when it's expected that all of the planning is entered or is reflected in the Azure DevOps boards. And also the PI calendar, the next PI planning event will happen on the 2nd and 3rd of June. So, and then we go off for the, right. So that's a little bit about how we went about it. Let me quickly show you how the PIPlanning.io app actually looks like. So you can have
Sean,
a look.
just a quick time check. We have 5 more minutes.
Okay.
So yeah, you can definitely share your screen. Go ahead. And folks, you know, we can probably take a couple of questions. So we have 5 minutes. If there's any open Q&A, you know, feel free, unmute yourself and ask questions.
Shantanu, is a PI planning tool is a free tool or?
It is not. It is a paid tool. So unfortunately, it's not a free tool. Yeah, it's a paid tool.
Okay, thanks.
It depends on the number of teams that you have. The cost is calculated by that, and there is a quarterly or yearly subscription available. Okay. Any other question, guys?
So Sean, you can go ahead and share your screen. Maybe.
Okay, great. So a quick share of how the tool actually looks like. So this is how it looks like. You have a team board over here, and then you have the program board over here. So once you enter something on the team board, so that is also represented on the program board.
Hey, Sean, can you unmute? Yeah, go ahead.
I did. Okay. So yeah, so this is the risks board where you can actually see the ROAM, and you can do that in real time. There's a program board where you can have all of your features, dependencies, and risks mentioned, and then there's a team board. As a RTE, you have the ability to enter and exit any team's board. So when we did the presentations, we were able to do this. We actually went into each one of the team boards, clicked on that, so that got enlarged, and then the presenters could actually present from here the PI objectives as well as the business value as to what they had planned on doing. So yeah, so that's a little bit about the tool. It works well. There's also one more called Candice, which is more, it's actually a better tool. It's just that the integration of the tool with the Jira or your DevOps takes some time for it to happen. So if you have enough time to plan for the next PI planning meeting, I would suggest going with that tool rather than the PIplanning.io tool. But choose your tool. It works great. As long as everyone is aware of how that goes, that's the best thing to do. With that, let me pass it back to Paul. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. If not, back to Paul.
I guess we only have 2 minutes, so just one question if you have anybody, just one question. So Audrey, thank you. We appreciate your time. Sean, thank you for sharing some valuable information about your success story. And folks, we're also planning to do another webinar on just the tools itself. So basically remote PI planning tools. So we're going to have folks from Scaled Agile present some of the tools basically. So best practices and tools that are available in the marketplace. But again, so there is a lot of tools available in the marketplace. PI planning app is just one, but there are so many of them, right? So obviously, do your research. All right, that being said, we only have 1 minute. I think we will go ahead and end this session. Thank you. Appreciate you all. Thank you, Audrey and Sean.